This is the scariest story you've ever heard. Sitting down comfortably.
An ominous fog. The rather warm and excessively damp end of March gave out the grayness of fog in the Earth's atmosphere. Of course, this fog was perfectly visible in the city, but it was outside the city that it was several times better visible. For reasons unknown to myself, I loved fogs, finding in them something mysterious, romantic, beautiful, changing. It was these feelings that made me leave the city, going in search of fogs, in which I will definitely find something, understand, acquire, and increase. Yes, partly somewhere in the depths of my consciousness, rational thinking, I knew that all this is just, if I may say so, romantic ideas about nature, but I want to believe in them so much, dream about them, just hope that thanks to the fog my life will change for the better. Just 500 kilometers from the limits of the metropolis seemed enough for me to realize in some mystical way that it was here that I would find what I was looking for. Although I have already experienced similar feelings 1,000 times, but the throbbing in my body told me that this time I would not be mistaken. After leaving the train, fresh air immediately hit my nose, which I could not fully enjoy. In terms of fresh air, coniferous forests that surrounded the village, I was greedy to the point of insanity and irresistible intemperance. After examining what was at the platform itself, I realized that if it wasn't the fogs that would change my life, then this beautiful view for sure. However, the standing platform seemed to be hiding among the coniferous forests from what could cause irretrievable damage to it. I didn't see any villages, or roads, and I couldn't even see any gaps behind the trunks of centuries-old pine trees. Only one fog, floating serenely, thickened ahead of my gaze. That's where I need to go. Having adjusted my jacket and briefcase more comfortably, I went slowly, as if I had finally returned home and now I could calmly walk and relax properly. Of course, I knew that no matter what this huge forest was, on this day I would be absolutely alone in it. It was understandable, because I sincerely believed that I was the only madman on the planet who wandered through the forests without doing anything at a sufficient distance from populated areas in weather when rain clouds were overhead, and snow and puddles were underfoot, and all in order to get out into the fog. Slowly wandering through the loose snow, sometimes my feet fell off it, I walked forward to where it seemed to me the fog was more saturated and dense. And fortunately for me, I happened to be in a fog that prevented me from seeing more than 5 meters ahead. I was glad, excited, pleased, delighted. I was convinced that my life would change and now it would never be the same. But I didn't know it would happen so soon. Not seeing the road in front of me, I didn't see the cliff and could have fallen headlong into it if someone hadn't grabbed my briefcase and pulled me back at the last moments. I immediately turned around and saw my savior. He was a thin, rather elongated brunette with a pale face and sunken eyes. Getting to my feet, I immediately thanked him, to which I received advice to be careful and follow him. Although it was a strange request, given the circumstances and location, but still I decided to follow him. We walked for about half an hour through the forest through a thick fog, without saying a single word. He walked so confidently, with a clear understanding of where and why he was going. While all this time I was in utter confusion, like an inexperienced puppy that is afraid of every rustle in an unknown territory. I was already used to this silence, blindly following him, when suddenly he stopped in front of something that struck me to the core. A 6-story abandoned building that had been empty for at least half a century, but somehow retained its durability and former power. My companion explained that this was a former closed research institute where insane experiments with the human body were carried out, and at the peak of their power here scientists tried to prove or disprove the existence of the soul. But as it often happens when people climb where they shouldn't, something went wrong. A lot of people died here in vain, mostly those who were experimented on, namely homeless people, drunks and drug addicts without a family and home. Basically, these were the unfortunate ones that no one will ever look for, and if they do, the dry inscription missing will hide these terrible experiments. But they were still people. With a wave of his hand, my companion led me inside. Inside, I began to worry about some kind of anxiety, an unhealthy feeling of shaking. This oppressive feeling acted on me like an electric current. But I went on. My companion showed me the rooms where experiments were carried out and people died, and I saw the blood of those unfortunate people absorbed many years ago. There was blood absolutely everywhere, and it was so deeply absorbed into the concrete that years later it still showed up on the walls, stream and floor. The satellite also told me about the experiments in the slightest detail, and my imagination finished drawing how people cut out organs here, sew on extra limbs and cut off existing ones. And all this without any anesthesia. It got worse and worse when I realized and accepted all this. If it wasn't for my companion, I would have been left there fainting. I took his offer to see something beautiful in this whole building as a salvation for myself. And immediately he led me higher and higher. We passed by 2 floors, to which my companion promised to take me without fail, and when we went up to the roof, I saw an exciting sight. We were standing on an open roof at the level of the pine crowns. Everywhere I could see, I saw only green trees. We stood there, blown by a fresh wind, endowed with the coolness of the forest. I felt like I was getting lighter with every breath. My companion looked at me indifferently, immediately turned away and, going to the edge of the roof, sat down there. Without thinking twice, I joined him and began to look into the distance. His silence told me a lot, and when he spoke again, it was hard for me. He told me that after looking at 2 more floors, we will definitely come back so that I can see something important. I don't know why, but at that moment I thought about sunset. And I thought about my companion that he was a little crazy, he would laugh to see the sunset through the clouds. We went to inspect the building again. The last 2 floors turned out to be less terrible, since it was just an archive. And it was there that they kept all the documents and records about those terrible experiments with photographs of how it was all carried out. Valka pity for those who died befell me. And at the same time, I realized how my companion knew about everything that had once happened here. At the request of my companion, I took several folders with documents to make them public by posting them on the internet. We went to the roof again to see what he wanted to show me so much. We sat down on the edge again, and he pointed his finger at the wasteland, explaining that there was an underground bunker there, in which there was much more interesting. And as soon as the water leaves there, he takes me there, which I agreed to. He also asked me to look at the folder number 635 when I get home. But I couldn't imagine what happened next. My companion jumped off the roof of a 6-story building with a sharp movement. I would like to catch him, but alas, I did not have time. I saw him flying down and about 5 meters from the ground he just disappeared, leaving not a single trace of himself. I immediately went downstairs and started looking for him, but he was nowhere to be found. Terrified, I ran headlong from there, despite the roots of the trees, which I stumbled over in the fog, through which nothing could be seen. And only when I almost fell into the same ravine again, someone caught me. It was him again, alive and unharmed. He handed me my phone and the backpack I'd left on the roof. He also reminded me about that folder. And he disappeared again, disappearing into the fog, adding that he was waiting for me in 3 days. Shocked, I ran on, to where there is no such mysticism and horror. I wanted to get it all out of my head, but I couldn't. I prayed that all this was a fantasy of my sick imagination, but the cases that were in the backpack spoke of the reality of what had happened. And only when I got home, I opened these cases and what I saw there turned out to be no less shocking and frightening information that struck me to the bone. My companion was one of the first people from whom scientists took away the soul, sending it home, and leaving the body in the form of a living bag of meat and bones. And now his soul is forever locked up on the territory of this research institute, held by some otherworldly forces that are beyond my understanding, and his body is already long dead somewhere underground. Alas, but now he has remained locked up there forever, neither alive nor dead, in eternal suffering in the horror of eternal torment to remember everything that happened within the walls of this building. Over time, when I could calm down, I realized something important for myself, namely that the request of the spirit that saved me several times that day is a matter of honor for me and in my life. And I know exactly where I'm going in 3 days at the will of the ghost. In the meantime, I will tell the whole world about him, as he asked me to.